So before we get into the other two market structures, the in-betweeners, if you will, monopolistic competition, oligopoly, now that we know about market power, we can divert real quickly to talk about price discrimination. Discrimination is a bad word in most contexts, appropriately so. When it comes to price discrimination, maybe in some cases it could be considered bad, but when you get introduced to some of the ways in which it's done, you might think of it as being a little bit more benign, and it may or may not be. That's more a subjective thing that is up to you to determine, but it's more common than you might think. And well, as we're going to see in one of these slides, it, at least from one way of looking at things, might not be a bad thing at all, which is a stretch to say, but we'll get to that. So what is price discrimination in general? In general, price discrimination means that if you are running your business, you are selling a good or service, you would like to sell that good or service at the highest price possible to everybody. So far, we've been looking at scenarios in which every consumer who comes in pays the same exact amount no matter what their willingness to pay is. But what if you can figure out their willingness to pay? And of course, this is why a lot of people would prefer to sell their stuff in auctions, where you can set a minimum price at which you're willing to part with it, but then you can get people to bid that price up. And the person with the highest willingness to pay, they're the ones who get it. There's an interesting component of advanced micro classes when you guys get to grad school after you change your majors to economics, as I know you're all going to do. That gets into auction theory and auction mechanisms and how they work, but that's obviously not for a principles class. But that is one way of trying to get as close to the maximum willingness to pay that you can. In practice, it's very hard to do, which is why we tend to go into a store, there's a price label, and everybody pays that price. Obviously, if you're buying a car or a house, there's a little more negotiation, and maximum willingness to pay and minimum willingness to sell can be revealed, and things can move in different directions. But again, it's useful to understand what these things mean in terms of theory, even if they're not necessarily realistic, and then build to more realistic things. So let's start off with the simplest type of price discrimination. That's what you see here. First degree price discrimination, also often known as perfect price discrimination. And this is the theoretical scenario in which every single consumer, the producer is able to figure out their maximum willingness to pay, and every single consumer willingly pays that price for the good or service. And a mutually beneficial exchange is made. It is still mutually beneficial because the consumer will walk away at higher prices, but is willing to pay that maximum price. Now, first at the outset, it should be pointed out, to have price discrimination, you have to have market power. And this may already have occurred to you. In perfect competition, we already said people may have a higher willingness to pay. They're still not going to pay it because they know that your competitors will pay them the same thing. But we've seen with market power, with monopolies, if there are no competitors, it's either pay this price or you're going to have to accept a massive reduction in utility because there are no close substitutes. So you have to have some degree of market power, some degree of ability to charge prices that are higher than a sort of average market clearing willingness to pay, if you will. So first degree price discrimination is when everyone will pay their maximum willingness to pay, and they will happily do so. Well, they may not happily do so, but they will. And you can figure out exactly what it is. So you have to have something that looks a bit like a monopoly here. Marginal cost equals average total cost. If that's right here, that's a very perfect competition looking thing. But marginal cost equals marginal revenue. Here, that's where you want to. That's your profit maximizing quantity. We know that this is a maximum willingness to pay. So this is going to be the market price, and you're already making a nice profit here using these numbers. The thing is, if you can get everybody's exact maximum willingness to pay, you can produce things and sell them at marginal costs that are equal to the price or slightly above the price, and you can sell to all these people up here, and you can capture basically all of that consumer surplus. So you end up wanting to sell to everyone in this triangle here, and what you end up seeing is there's actually no deadweight loss in this situation. So this is why we say that with perfect price discrimination with no deadweight loss, you actually get the same thing as you do with a competitive outcome. It's just the producers capture all the consumer surplus. So that's why I said it's a bit of a stretch to say that it's not bad. And of course, this is why producers would want to do it. Their profits go up. If this is a market price in perfect competition, that's what you sell even to people up here. But if you can sell to people up here, then you make even more money. So that's a nice dream to live in if you run a business, but it's not quite realistic. So let's get on to second-degree price discrimination. This is a little more realistic. And this, as you can see from the definition, bulk pricing. You can go to, I'm sure a lot of you go to Costco. I know we go to Costco all the time, and we buy in bulk. And you buy in bulk because the per unit costs are lower than if we went to a more convenient place to shop. You know how inconvenient Costco can be. If you go to a more convenient place and you buy a single unit, you're going to pay more per unit. And the reason this is price discrimination is because you're essentially willing to pay for the convenience of not having to buy in bulk. But if your willingness to pay is low enough to where you will not buy at that higher per unit cost, but you will buy in bulk, producers can kind of separate people out from the market, and some producers can specialize in selling to the low willingness to pay types by selling in bulk, while others can specialize in selling to the higher willingness to pay types, and the market gets split up that way, and everybody specializes in their niche market, and everybody's happy on the producer side. And again, consumers are also ostensibly happy because some people get to save money on per unit costs because they went to Costco. Other people are able to save time and inconvenience by not having to go to the big parking lot with the big carts and the long lines and the warehouse-looking place and so on. Third degree price discrimination is the one where you might actually think it's not necessarily a bad thing. You've heard of early bird specials. Hey, isn't that nice? Senior citizens, they go to bed earlier, so they come in earlier in the day and they get to pay a little less. Senior citizen discounts. You have student discounts. Many of you, once movie theaters open back up anyway, might be able, I remember rocking my student discount as much as I could to get cheaper movie tickets. Kids eat free nights. My wife and I have often shopped around on weeknights for places that have kids eat free nights when it's just, we were involved in some extracurricular activity with the kids and no time to cook, but, you don't want to spend too much money eating out. But if you go to someone who has a kids eat free night, all of these seem like nice things for businesses to do, but why are they doing it? Coupons are another example of this. Well, advertisement is one reason. You advertise to certain people that you're going to offer a discount and those people might come in, but you can also think about it from a different perspective. You don't want to eat out with the kids for dinner on a Wednesday night because it's a school night and everybody's going to go home late, so people with kids are less likely to eat out. Students tend not to have as much money as working professionals in their 30s, and so they're not as willing to pay higher prices for movie tickets. Senior citizens are oftentimes not as willing to pay higher prices for eating out. They have fixed incomes, working off of a pension or something. Maybe inflation's eating away at it, and they have to budget a little bit more. For a lot of reasons, a lot of these groups, someone who's willing to go to the trouble of acquiring coupons and then take longer to buy something as they get those coupons out is someone who has a lower willingness to pay overall. And what businesses do is they recognize that a lot of people fall into these categories. Not everybody. This is why it's imperfect price discrimination. But a lot of people in these categories simply won't do business with them because the prices are too high. And they'll be able to sell to some other people, but not to students who have less money, senior citizens on fixed incomes, people who just don't want to spend money, so they'll clip coupons, etc. But if they offer a way for certain groups of people to spend less, to pay less, but it's a way of offering it to where people who have to pay more aren't going to be as upset. Hey, I'm not a student anymore. I don't want to be a student. I already graduated, or I just didn't want to go to school in the first place. So I'm fine paying a little more. It's not worth it to get that discount. Hey, isn't that nice that senior citizens can get a discount? I'm glad I'm not old, so I'm fine paying a little bit more if it doesn't apply to you, of course. Hey, I don't have kids, so I don't get anybody eating for free if I'm paying the bill for other people, etc. You're not as disgruntled about the fact that you have to pay more if these discounts don't apply to you. And of course, if they do apply to you, you're really happy. Some people will get these discounts, but I mean, there are students who would pay full price for movie tickets if they didn't get their student discount. Senior citizens who would pay full price if they didn't get a senior citizen discount. But these exist. Oh, look at that. Of course it's going to happen while I'm recording. I'm 11 minutes in. I'm not going back. Okay, so that sort of thing exists because that businesses have determined that there are enough people who simply wouldn't do business with them if they weren't able to find a lower price. And there are enough of them in these categories to where lowering the price for everyone in those categories makes a little bit more sense. So you divide people into groups, you produce your optimal output, and you sell at the highest price you can to each different group. So that is how price discrimination works. Now that we've got that down, we can get into the final two markets.